Coming Home, a podcast with Lane Kennedy. Welcome back. Hi guys, Lane Kennedy here. Another episode, and I'm following through with this mini series of introducing you to some of my favorite people in the Yoga Nidra space. And today I have another guest, and I'm really grateful that she has agreed to come on the show today with me and to share her journey into Yoga Nidra. I don't know if you know this, but Yoga Nidra is a gift that you give to yourself, and it keeps giving back. And that is why I'm doing this, is for you to be awakened to it. And if you hear all this noise in the background, guess what? That's my puppy. We're live. So I'm going to bring Brittany Lynn onto the show with us today. Brittany Lynn is an awesome yoga and mindfulness teacher. She's internationally trained. She's done thousands of hours of this practice and studying. She's a mindfulness teacher. She does and she's an incredible human being. I mean, her resume is rich, you guys. And she didn't start out in this yoga space. Her story is really interesting, and I think you're going to enjoy her. Brittany, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Lane.
Okay, my dog now is standing at the door, and I'm thinking, oh my God, do I have to run and take her out? This is my life.
That's okay.
Just 1 minute.
Yeah.
The day, right?
This is life.
This is life, you guys.
Life.
And you know,
I mean,
if you've listened to me long enough, you know that I just have to roll with it, right? And so do you. That's life.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
So Brittany, okay, let's get into this topic. And I'm super grateful that you're here. Thank you for joining me and sharing your story. I want to get right into the nitty gritty, because I think our listeners want to know why this practice. What makes this practice any different than any other meditation practice? But before we get there, I want you to share a little bit about your story and how you found it. What hit the fan for you?
Well, for me, what part of the story can I tell? I started working in the space of, I used to work in manufacturing and photography, and I was in a very, very high stress place. And it wasn't just the jobs that I was working in, but it was also just the lifestyle that I was leading and the way that I allowed myself to let my surroundings and my job and my lifestyle get to me and stress me out a lot. And so I found meditation practice, Vedic meditation practice, about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And it was something that shifted my entire life. And I began practicing yoga more. I started meditating regularly, and I ended up shifting my career from one of photography and filmmaking into one of sharing these practices with others. And one of the things about Yoga Nidra that's so special, and to me, is allowing not just to have a practice in the space of the conscious realm. And when we meditate, we're very conscious. I mean, sometimes we might go into that bliss state and we feel like, I don't know where I went. And that happens often in Yoga Nidra as well. But the thing that really drew me to Yoga Nidra, which is actually a newer practice for me within the last year, is the tapping into the brain and the subconscious, and starting to understand where our beliefs come from, and being able to kind of plant a new seed and reprogram these limiting beliefs and these things that we might have that are stopping us from becoming our best self, are achieving our highest potential. And so the practice of Yoga Nidra has been something that has really fascinated me since I started not only practicing it, but also learning the science behind it. Cause I'm a super science-y, nerdy kind of geek. So, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. So let's just back up for a minute, because you're not alone in having super stressful job,
Mm-hmm.
having the awakening of like, oh my God, I can't live with it like this anymore.
Right.
And then diving into the meditation or mindfulness or yoga space.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a listener out there and you're like in a high stress job, like all of the speakers that I brought on here, we're all the same. We've all come from this extremely stressful place,
Yeah.
and really said, you know what, we can't live like this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then we took a dive. I mean, it's really like just jumping into the unknown,
Right.
and discovering yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you talked about how unique Yoga Nidra is. Because
Mm-hmm.
meditation is, I mean, we all know that we should meditate.
Right.
We all know that it's good for us, but we don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how many conversations have you had with people and they just look at you and go, mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and most people say that to me, they say, I want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just not carving space and time out for myself.
Right.
And that, I think the biggest hurdle for all of us is with anything. It could be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be yoga nidra. It's all of these practices. We know they're good for us. We feel good when we do them.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very challenging to make it a priority.
Right.
And I think that one of the things with yoga nidra that's so special too is that it almost feels like a practice where you kind of let yourself off the hook a little bit.
Yeah.
When you're practicing yoga, obviously you're conscious for that. In meditation, I'm always telling, my students, because I specialize in teaching mindfulness and meditation in workplace settings, I'm always talking about how, if your body needs sleep, that's okay, but sleep and meditation are two different things. And so, it's sort of, I think a lot of times people put stress or pressure on themselves to stay awake when they're meditating. And even though in Yoga Nidra, we want to be in that hypnagogic state between awake and sleep, and we don't want to go just straight into deep sleep, we can kind of give ourselves a little bit of grace and let ourselves off the hook, because if we fall asleep, the practice is still going to be beneficial for us.
Yes.
And so I think that actually is really wonderful, because if you listen to a Yoga Nidra and you lay yourself down and you fall asleep, you don't have to feel like, oh gosh, I fell asleep and I'm not doing the practice, I'm not doing the work, because you actually are, even if you end up drifting off. So I think it's a really wonderful practice for those of us who are busy or stressed or feel like we can't sit up in meditation or whatever it happens to be. And it kind of gives us that permission to be able to allow ourselves, no matter how sleepy we are, no matter how much we have going on, to do this practice, to listen to someone lead us through this practice where we don't have to have any expectation on the other end of it.
That is so beautifully stated. Did you guys hear that? Right? Like I always tell my students, like, there's no perfection here. And if you fall asleep, it's all good. But what I just heard you say is that the practice is still working.
Yeah.
The practice is still doing its magic, even if you do drift off into sleepville. Right?
Exactly.
I have a student, actually, he was at my class last night, and he kind of like breathes heavily, like begins to snore a little bit. Right. And I just, bring him back, and then he drifts back into that deep state again. And he's always like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it rightly? And I'm like, absolutely. He's like, because I feel so rested. And I'm like, then you're doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's no right or wrong. That's the thing, is like, there's no gold stars or A pluses, like for doing something a certain way. It's just allowing yourself to be with everything that shows up that day. So if it's sleep, it's sleep. If it's something else that sort of is dug up, then that's what it is. If you feel super restful, whatever it happens to be, everything that shows up is exactly the way the practice needs to be.
Right. What has been one of the biggest shifts for you using this practice?
For me, it's been actually really interesting because I I have started to become so aware of a lot of things that maybe have either been sort of, I don't want to say swept under the rug, but things that I haven't necessarily paid attention to in my life that either have happened in the past or have affected me in ways that I didn't really understand. And through the practice of Yoga Nidra, it's really interesting because even though I feel so extremely rested when I practice this practice, which is really extremely beneficial to me. Right now I'm packing up to move out of the country for a while. And so I have a lot that's on my plate wrapping up my time in Los Angeles after 17 years. But this practice really helps to bring me into that place of feeling extremely rested. That being said, I also come out of these practices with so much insight. It's, things just come up for me, and I have inspiration that arises, and sometimes I feel like I've released things that have been, weights on my shoulders, even if I don't know exactly what's coming up or exactly what's being processed. I just feel an energetic shift that's happening when I do these practices. And it's actually kind of hard to explain because sometimes I can pinpoint it. Sometimes I can say, okay, this thing came up for me during this practice. I'm going to journal it out and I'm able to release and let go. But there are other times where I don't even know what it is, but I'm like, oh, I felt a shift. And it just feels like being able to unearth myself, my real self, when I do this practice on a regular basis without having to even know what it is I'm looking for. It's letting go of expectation and just allowing the practice to do its magic without me forcing anything to happen. Just pretty incredible.
Okay, I want you to get specific.
Okay.
Because you know what? I can relate to that, but we have listeners here who've never experienced this, and maybe they're going through something, right?
Right.
And they need to understand exactly what it does, right? Because for me, it's lifted my depression completely, 100%. Right? Like I am no longer that mom that was miserable, right? I'm no longer that wife that was like, get away from me. Like it is completely transformed, right? Like it's really like shocking to me. And the more that I do this practice, the more freedom I get from that bondage that I had. I was like trapped as another being almost, I feel.
Right.
And so the Yoga Nidra practice has lifted me out of that, and it's granted me this permission to be authentic me. And I hear what you're saying in that, but I want to let's get granular for our listeners so they can go deep on this journey with you.
Right. I think so. For me, it's hard to I guess it's a little bit hard to extract exactly what Yoga Nidra is doing versus my other meditation practices as well. But I do know that since implementing Yoga Nidra practice into these meditative practices and this self-work, I guess you could say, on every different type of level, there's an overwhelming sense of peace that has come up. And I think when it comes to getting into the nitty gritty and the details, like you're asking, there are times where I've done this practice and a situation that had weighed on me in the past, whether it's forgiving somebody or having, some strings or ties to a certain situation that I thought that maybe I processed consciously, like, oh yeah, no, I'm over it. That sort of thing that we do where we're like, oh yeah, no, I've thought about it. We've talked about it. I'm over it. There have been times in my practice where something will come up as, like, for example, having a visual of this person that I've had a challenging time with sitting in front of me and really being able to look them in the eye, in my mind's eye, and see them as a human being rather than somebody who hurt me. I think that for me, it's been really powerful to be able to have these experiences. And again, it's not expected. Some of these things come up. One day is different than the other, but having these experiences where I have this shift in my mindset where I understand that things happen. Things just happen. Things are not happening around me or to me because, it's not about somebody doing something to me in order to hurt me. It's not about a situation happening or a challenge arising in life, to bring me down. I think Yoga Nidra has really helped me to understand, to see things as they are. The practice itself, there are times when things come up and they just are. It's not to shake the boat or stir something in me that's, meant to hurt me in any way or frustrate me or whatever it happens to be, or make me sad or make me happy or whatever the emotion might be. But I think that with more of this practice, it's really great to be able to step back and say, whatever comes my way during practice and out of practice, it is what it is. And I'm able to see it from a fresh pair of eyes instead of seeing it from that ego place of me, what's happening around me is happening to me, because that just isn't the case. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And I hear forgiveness.
Absolutely.
I hear, like, you're talking very specific about a person, right? And seeing them differently and being free from them. And I just did an episode. It was my birthday, and I did an episode. Thank you, about forgiveness. And I have found that forgiveness in this practice, and that's what I'm hearing. Very similar to what you do. Is like there's a release, a letting go.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest, it hasn't just been a release of situations or people that are outside of me. For me, it's really been a deep dive into forgiveness of myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that.
Oh my God. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So let's give our listeners some tips. Let's get practical.
Okay.
Because we're like, we're practitioners, we're pros, we're in deep on this stuff.
Absolutely.
And, this is, it can be hard to create a practice.
Absolutely.
Right? So how do you share how you start?
Well, I think that it's a couple of things. It depends on somebody's personality. I'm very much a recovering perfectionist type A personality, which is why I think, for me, this is why I shifted my lifestyle into teaching, because it's helped me so very much.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's very helpful to either set an alarm or schedule it in. As much as I would love to just say, oh yeah, I just get up and I meditate and I practice, like, I am just such a by my calendar kind of girl. And if I don't carve out time for myself and I don't say, like, don't schedule anything right now, Brittany, like in my calendar, I have kind of a more challenging time doing these things for myself, because I will do everything for everyone else before I do things for myself, which is exactly what I need to flip. And so I think for certain people, if it has to do with actually scheduling it in, schedule it in, or set your alarm for 10 minutes earlier. I know that sleep is important, and it might feel like I really want that extra 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes of sleep. But Yoga Nidra is such an important practice that you actually get the benefits as if you slept, 4, 6, 8 more hours than if you did decide, I'm going to take off 20 minutes of my sleep. So I think that that's really important. And then I'll be honest, I know for myself, I would love to sit here and say, yes, I have this perfect practice and I get up every day and I do it at this time. And I really wish that I could say that, especially being a mindfulness and meditation teacher, but I just don't. I'm a human and I have things that go on. And I think that the number one thing is when you start a practice, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room and give yourself grace. If there's a day that goes by and you don't do your practice, don't feel like the last 5 days are all for naught. It's like you might have a good streak, but it's not about it's not like this 30-day challenge where like you're going to get to the end and be like, yes, I did it for 30 days. That's not the point of this practice. This is a lifelong practice. If you go a day or two or a week or whatever it happens to be and you don't do it, and then you start to notice, oh gosh, I'm feeling different because I'm not practicing, then just remind yourself, okay, it's okay that I didn't do it, but I'm going to come back to it because I know how important it is and I know how it makes me feel. So I think, allowing yourself those days when it doesn't happen, don't beat yourself up over it, because we don't need to have meditation or yoga nidra be something that causes more stress in our life. Right. It should be something that's taking away our stress and giving ourselves that place to pour out some of that stress from our cup. So I think being gentle with yourself is a really, really powerful thing. And and committing to it. And it's really hard, but I think the most challenging thing is committing to yourself and just saying, I deserve this 10 minutes, this 20 minutes, this 30 minutes, whatever it happens to be, to practice, because I will be able to show up for myself, for other people, for my kids, for my spouse, for my friends, for my students, for whatever it happens to be, for my dog. Like you will show up in the world lighter, more free, more peaceful when you do carve out this time in your day for yourself. And it's not selfish, just understanding that it's not selfish, but it's necessary.
Okay, you just brought up so much, and I'm like, okay, where do I want to go with that? So I think one of the key things that you brought up, though, I'm going to nail this. we're gonna nail this to the wall. This idea of like, nobody has time, so sleep is essential. Nobody sleeps really great these days, and so this idea of how the brain is operating. And let's get nerdy here for a second. Yeah. Because I know both of us are really into the science of how Yoga Nidra works. And you mentioned that, that 20 minutes is actually going to feed you an extra, potential hour of sleep or an extra 2 hours of sleep, right? Just giving yourself, waking yourself up 20 minutes before you're supposed to get up, rolling over, getting on the floor, doing your practice or whatever you want to do, right? But what actually is happening in the brain? Let's go there for a minute.
So in a Yoga Nidra practice, the ideal state, which it's a practice, right? Okay, so I'm going to preface it with that. It's a practice. Yep. The first time you lay down for Yoga Nidra, the first 10 times, the first month, the first year, whatever it is, I know for me, I end up falling asleep. I'm still a newer practitioner. It's been only a year since I've been practicing Yoga Nidra, and there are a lot of times where I still fall asleep because I'm tired. And that's what my body needs. But what happens ideally in a Yoga Nidra practice is that you're actually going into this space between awake and asleep. It's kind of that place where I kind of mentioned before, where you're like, I know I wasn't asleep, but I think I was awake. I heard her voice, or whatever it happened.
It's very dreamy-like.
And it's a very kind of like this dream, like bliss state that you can't really explain, and the time flies, and you're like, but I know I wasn't asleep. That's the hypnagogic state, and that's between the awake and asleep state, where you're moving from these more beta brainwave lengths and this alpha, where it's a lot more calm, but you're kind of right on the brink of sleep, between the alpha and theta brainwaves, where the theta is with that light sleep. And what's happening is when we put ourselves into these states, these brainwave lengths, and these states that our brain was in when a lot of the things, let's say from either childhood, or a lot of the states that we're in when trauma happened, and kind of in these places where our brain programmed things from ages 0 to 8, when we get back into that brainwave length that we program things in, we actually have an opportunity to reprogram whatever our beliefs happen to be. And so the more that we allow ourselves to get into that place, we are not only giving ourselves that time to reprogram, but it is a place where we get this restful, I don't want to say sleep because it's not sleep, but this true rest that our body needs, that we don't allow ourselves to do. I mean, in our lives, we're either going, and we're just doing to get stuff done, or we we are asleep. Our body, like, it's just like, oh, well, I'll sleep, I'll just sleep and I'll be fine. Well, we need to have some conscious and subconscious rest in order for our bodies to be working in the optimal state that they can be working in. So Yoga Nidra provides us that space that we can actually be awake and in this kind of in-between space where we're actually going to be giving ourselves more rest because we are consciously or subconsciously resting rather than just knocking out and being unconscious and hoping for the best. I know also with Yoga Nidra, when more that we practice and we allow ourselves that space, it can actually help when we are sleeping too. So when we go to sleep at night, our brain can get into the restful spaces a lot easier than if we're just always stressed out. And then we feel like, oh yeah, I'm sleeping 5, 6, 7 hours a night, but I'm always waking up tired. When we do a practice like Yoga Nidra, it helps. I don't know if the right word is regulate, but it helps us to get into a pattern that invites more restful sleep when you are asleep as well.
Yeah. And I just want to like kind of deepen this like theta state, right? This theta state is when we are connected to this spiritual, this kind of out of body experience. We can do this. We can actually hit theta, a lot of times we can go into theta if we're really like playing the guitar, sitting on the beach. We can drop down into the state in a wakeful state. And we, great painters, right? They can drop down into this theta state. And there's this sense of beautiful ease and calm and serenity. And it's here that not only can we start to rewire these old behaviors, but we also we begin to rewire new ideas.
Yeah.
Right. We have this new insights. We have new, it's like a new way to see a situation.
Right.
So
Absolutely. And we're creating new neural pathways as well, and I think the common misconception too is people think that these brainwave states that we are in, like, oh, theta and delta, you're asleep. Well, no, we actually have all of these wavelengths happening when we're awake, when we're asleep. It's just which one is more dominant. And so like you were saying, if somebody's playing the guitar or they're, a lot of people like even like going for a run, like people say like, oh, that's really meditative for me. Yeah, you're conscious and you're in that space. You do not have to be on the brink of sleep to get into theta. You are more in that brainwave length when you are falling asleep, but that does not mean that it can't be accessed in our wakeful moments as well. And I think that is the common misconception is people think that it's compartmentalized and it's like, oh, well, when I'm beta, I'm doing this, and alpha, I'm doing this. And it's like, they're all there. It's just a matter of learning to access these brainwave lengths when doing other things as well. And I think that when we can also access these during a practice of Yoga Nidra, and we can start to create these new neural pathways and these new patterns, we're able to take that into our wakeful life as well. It's not just about, oh, I feel so good after I do this practice. It's like we're creating these new ways of showing up in the world because we're creating these new ways that our brain actually connects itself and connects how we connect to the rest of the world.
So you guys, I want you to grab the free Yoga Nidra that I have, right? Lane Kennedy /free YN practice. You got to just try it, right? It's like unbelievable when you get into these states that Brittany and I are talking about, because your life begins to change. And you heard Brittany say, she was in a high stress job and boom, she let it go because she found like meditation and transformed her life. Brittany, I have loved our conversation. I could talk to you all day because we both like totally geek out on the science of this.
Totally. Yeah.
So maybe I'll have you back on again.
That'd be wonderful.
For a future show, and we can go really deep. How are people going to find you? Do you want them to meet you over on Instagram?
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that's the best place. So my Instagram name is Beautifully Awakening. And that is also my website, beautifullyawakening.com. And yeah, Instagram is the best. I post a lot up there, my stories, things that I share. My website's up on there as well. And I have different links to retreats that I have coming up. I'm going to be recording a Yoga Nidra practice soon as well. That will be available. And I also have a free meditation on my website. When you go to my website, a thing pops up, free meditation, and that's up there for anybody who'd like to use it as well.
Yes. You guys go and check out what she's doing. I mean, really, like when I met Brittany, it's like one of those things that you meet somebody across the room and you're like, yes, I know.
Yes.
Right. Like you look at all the people and you're like, that one right there, I'm going in.
I feel you.
Yeah.
I feel
So, she's got a special spirit. Make sure to check her out. Hit her up on Instagram and grab her meditation. Brittany, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. You guys, keep on keeping on. Thank you for being here with us.
I'm so honored. Thank you so much for having me, Lane. I really appreciate it.
May this day bring you something light, something bright, and something so juicy and delicious so that you may be the best you can be. Until next time, take good care, my friends.
Don't forget, grab the app. Start your journey with Yoga Nidra today. Thanks for listening.
Coming Home, a podcast with Lane Kennedy.